So how did you first decide, yes, there's a story in this, and then how did you get about unwinding the data to figure out what was inside?
Well, the German journalist and his colleague, Frederick Obermeier, they're same surnames, but they're different, totally different people. They were convinced from day one that this was huge. But of course, my job at ICIJ was to be the skeptical voice, and you have to convince me this was a story. We saw initially there were quite a lot of interesting names in there. I mean, one of the early names we saw was actually the Prime Minister of Iceland. And we saw lots of people who were connected and who were in jail in Iceland for being involved in the collapse of the Icelandic banks. We also saw a hitman from the Russian mafia in there. He was in jail, so of course that was interesting as well. But I wasn't initially convinced that this was big. We knew that Mossack Fonseca was a notorious law firm. It was one of the top 5 firms in the world for setting up offshore accounts for clients basically around the world. And it was well known that one of their clients was Mugabe and Gaddafi was another client. And this kind of had been written about before. So we knew it was an interesting firm. But you know, even though we had 1 million documents at the beginning, it didn't seem like it was going to be this huge, big story because we had already done several other offshore stories. I mean, Mark mentioned a few of them. We'd started with offshore leaks in 2013. Then we did Luxembourg leaks. We then got the inside information on the HSBC Bank a year earlier. So I was very conscious of the fact that I didn't want this to be another story about the same thing. We really needed to have something that was completely different. But Bastian was very persistent. He kept ringing me, he kept telling me we were getting more documents. And eventually, after about, well, I can't even remember, it was several weeks, I basically flew to Munich. And we sat over 4 days in Munich, the 3 of us, and we looked through these documents. And at that point, it was clear to me that, yes, this was different, this was big. And my next stop was London, where I basically met with The Guardian and the BBC, and I began to build the collaboration that would eventually happen.